6 years ago, in 1955, Peter Ustinov came to a BBC studio and talked in detail about his journeys and experiences, especially in America, during the previous 2 years. Since that time, he's traveled even more widely, making films in Hollywood, in Italy, and Australia. He's taken in most of Europe, as well as countries such as Japan. He's toured America with his astonishingly successful play, Romanoff and Juliet. He's published hundreds of articles, several books, including a novel, The Loser, that's just out. Now, most people wonder how this phenomenally active man manages to fit it all in. What's more, without apparently losing weight. Therefore, before he gets absorbed in yet further ventures, we, that's Derek Hart, Kenneth Allsop, as well as himself, have offered him the prospect of a very little hospitality in return for a report on what he's been up to during these last few years, on the encounters that he's had and the situations that he's been in.
Peter, much of your past 6 years has been spent in America, in the theatre, filming, and incidentally making a very considerable impression on American television. What's it like now to be recognized and liked virtually wherever you go?
You're not always immediately recognized. That became clear, even painfully clear, when I was sitting on the set of Spartacus, which is that very large film which came out, which is, I think, the only film in the history of moving pictures which took longer to shoot than the actual historical events which it portrayed, and in which even the makeup had to change because we all grew perceptibly older. I know that when it started, my wife was 5 months pregnant, and by the time it ended, the result of that pregnancy was able to ask, "Mummy, where's Daddy?" And we were sitting one day with Charles Lawton on the set in his caravan, when one of those ladies on a conducted tour, they have conducted tours of studios in America. It was a lady with rhinestone rims to her glasses, which are very fashionable in America. In fact, I once wrote a short story. They have very dim lighting very often in American offices to give an impression of relaxation and an ability to be meaningful and correct surroundings for meditation, in which the only source of light was the lady's rhinestone glasses. And this lady with rhinestone glasses looked in and saw Charles Lawton, who was sitting there in a toga, and looked at him straight in the eye and said, "Oh!" He was very flattered. "Thank you very much." She said, "Oh, just the greatest." Thank you. What your performance in The Cat on the Half-Tin Roof was, I think, just the most wonderful thing I ever saw. And Charlie was a very resilient actor, hardly altered his expression at all. I could just see the slight squall of pain passing across his face. "Thank you." He said, "And that wonderful scene where you had the cancer in the attic and you were talking to the little boy and you didn't want to let on. Oh, I thought that was just marvelous, marvelous." He said, "Thank you." And the other scene with the ice cream and the children on the airport, the greatest, the greatest. Then she left. And I said to Charles, the trouble with people like that is not at the moment that they say things like that, but when they come back and wish to apologize for what they've said. At that moment, of course, she reappeared. And she said, "What can you think of me?" "Oh, I don't know what made me say that. I don't know how I got you confused with Mr. Burl Ives. I suppose because both of you are fat." She said, "But I saw you in something just as great as anything Mr. Ives ever did, and that was the witness of the prostitution." I think actually what happened is that she ran out to the bus, saw her friend that she'd been traveling with, and said, "I've just seen Burl Ives." And the friend said, "Oh, don't be silly, that was Charles Lawton." "Oh, you're quick, give me something he's been in." And the woman said, "Witness of the prosecution." "Thank you." And she'd got the names wrong. She said, "Witness." So I started entering into it, and I said, "Yes, wasn't that marvelous scene when he was looking through the keyhole on his knees?" You know, "Oh, that was, I think that was probably the climax of the whole film." It was then I thought it was just the greatest. So then Charles began ribbing me slightly. And looking at the lady, he said, "You've met Edward G. Robinson, have you all?" And she looked at me and she said, Oh, you're not Edward G. Robinson, you're Walter Ustinov." So much for recognition. Now, Walter Houston, father of John Houston, we've heard a great deal that he's a practical joker. Is he this kind of practical joker? Is he notorious for it among you as well as among people such as us? Yes, I never quite understand the point of practical jokes, quite frankly, because so many of them are done when the people are not there to see the result, as when they send police to somebody's house or something to arrest them, and they're not there to see it. I don't quite get that, but certainly John Huston is a celebrated practical joker. He played one or two very mean tricks on me, which were taken in very bad part. By you? Yeah, of course. In which he asked everybody to ignore me one day, which was a very disturbing experience. Every time I asked something, they'd turn their back. And he also got me on the set of The African Queen and said, you can only really see it from this puddle here, and you've got to put these waders on. And I couldn't get into the waders. He turned all the hoses on. I was wet through. So I'm not a very good practical joker, but that night I turned the tables on him because he came to see me in The Love of Four Colonels, which was running then, and I knew he was there. And it sounds a rather sinister story now, but it wasn't then, of course, because Humphrey Bogart was still alive and kicking and was a great friend of mine. But I decided to have him paged during the interval. Houston, in order to talk to Humphrey Bogart from Charing Cross Hospital. And I watched through the little slot in the curtain. I could see him being fetched, and he was taken to the box office, where they put him through to my dressing room. And I heard, and they were already very far behind schedule. Which film was this one? This was The African Queen. Aye. And he said, hello, is Mr. Bogart there? He's been phoning me. I said, who? Mr. Humphrey Bogart? I don't know, you know, I'm not the regular man here, of course. I've only just come on, as a matter of fact, and I've been ill myself. Well, please, this is Mr. Houston here. Who did you want to speak to? One of the officials of the hospital here. No, I have a call from Mr. Bogart. Oh, I don't know. You're Mr. Bogart, are you? No, I'm Mr. Houston, and so it went on. Well, I don't know. You see, I don't like to touch any of these instruments here because I don't know where anything leads to. I don't want to be inhospitable or anything. If somebody's been calling you, wouldn't it be better to wait till they call back again? Well, I don't know what's wrong with him. Why did he call? Well, I don't know. Eventually, I let myself be persuaded by him to call up the various departments, and I went, hello? Is that the casualty ward? No, this is maternity here. I'm sorry. And I went right round the imaginary hospital like that doing this. And eventually got to, I said, yes. Is that casualty ward? Yes. Is there got a man called Mr. Houston? No, I'm sorry, Mr. Bogart. Yes. Who wants to speak to him? That's me, John Huston. I'm directing the picture. You want to speak to him, yes. You are what concerned with the picture? I'm the director. Oh, you're not the producer? No, I'm the director. I've always wanted to know what the difference is. Is there a great difference? And so on. We went from it. But I wouldn't say what was wrong with Bogart, and eventually I said, well, I would rather wait until there's a second and even third opinion, and they won't be here for another, it's now 20 past, he's always late. About 3/4 of an hour, I think, could be ever. You've got to tell me. And I said, well, I suspect, and I'll tell you this off the record, it's a fractured eyelash, and fractured in two places in late. And then there was a long pause, and he realized it was just my revenge for being wet through.
Peter, just now you mentioned this muddled film fan who recognized neither you nor Lawton. What about other Americans, officials, and people whom you have to give your name and license to?
Well, for people that don't know America well, you can run into extraordinary difficulties there sometimes. They're very nice. They're very eager to get you off the hook, which you've landed on without knowing better. For instance, the frontier of the state of Arizona has a customs office, which is larger than the United States Customs, and I was driving in a station wagon which I'd been lent. And the man at the frontier of Arizona looked in and said, get out. This is a very good beginning for anything. I got out. He said, you got any nuts with you? I said, what? You got any ground nuts, pecans, agricultural produce? I said, no, I haven't got any. I've got some dirty laundry, which is in the back. Get it out of there. I want to look at it. So I said, what is this? He said, where you come from? I said, Chicago. That's an agricultural area. I didn't want to disillusion him. I hadn't seen a tree for weeks. then, as he took the dirty laundry, underneath was a bottle of Framboise, a French like kirsch, white liqueur, which we'd opened at Christmas about 4 weeks before and drunk that amount, and the rest of the bottle was still there. He said, "Is that liquor?" I said, "Yes." "You're driving with an open bottle of liquor in the car?" "Come on, you can tell your story to the judge in the morning." I said, "Why? You know the Arizona state law?" I said, "No." "It's a permanent temptation to drink." I said, "Well, what about a hip flask?" "That's all right. This is a bottle." I said, "But I don't understand that. But I haven't drunk it." "It's there. You can tell your story to the judge in the morning." I said, "But tomorrow's Sunday." "That's right. You can tell your story to the judge the day after tomorrow." So I didn't relish staying 48 hours in prison. I said, "But what happens if you order a bottle of wine in Arizona and it's delivered to you and you open it and it's corked? Now you've opened the bottle. You can't take it back to the wine merchant. He can't come and fetch it." "That's right. You can tell your story to the judge Monday morning." So that wasn't getting me anywhere. So eventually I said, "Well, have I got time to call the British consul in Los Angeles? I don't think Phoenix is big enough to have one." He said, "You're American." I said, "No, I'm British." "You said you came from Chicago." I said, "There's a village in Essex called Chicago, after which the American one is named, like Boston." "Is that right?" I said, "Yes, and I'm now eager to go to prison because I'm on a goodwill mission here for NATO. I'm on the Naval Voluntary Reserve, and I'm lecturing in America." "Next time you're in Arizona, remember this. Don't travel," and I got... It was a scaring moment.
Was this the only brush you had with the police at that time?
No, I had a small car, an Italian car, which I had taken over, a little Alfa Romeo, which I was driving from New York to Ottawa, and I was driving quite fast, and suddenly on the freeway, as they call it, the huge road, and I saw in the back a police, one of those red lights that does that, and I saw him in the driving mirror, and I went a little bit faster. I didn't know what he wanted, and I saw him going faster too. And I came around the corner, and there was one of these Howard Johnsons, they call these milkshake bars. And I rushed up the ramp, hid among all the big American cars with 8 headlights each, switched off my lights, went in and had a milkshake, and I saw the police. So I had my milkshake. I waited for about 10 minutes, looked at the map, and saw I could get off the freeway and do some small country roads, and then rejoin the freeway about 7 miles further on. So after I'd paid for my milkshake, I drove off, rejoined the freeway, and I found the police waiting for me at the entrance. "Hey, wasn't it you about 7 miles back in a small foreign car, automobile? Speeding? Way back there?" I said, "Io cerco di trovare Ottawa. La strada per Ottawa." The policeman said, "Non era lei." 7 kilometers. To my horror, I'd got an Italian policeman. And my Italian began to go all wrong under this influence. I got more and more flustered, and eventually he said, "Ma lei veramente italiano?" I played the only trump card I possibly had. I said, "Sono sardo, Sardinia." Because I knew there were very few Sardinians in America, and they spoke a different dialect. If I'd said Sicilian, I would have had it, because there are lots of them. And he said, "No."
Do you think American officials are worse or just different from those we have in Europe?
Oh no, they're very nice on the whole. They're quite different. For instance, the English customs look at you with that very calculated look. They sometimes don't look at you at all. They show you this piece of paper, don't they, as you know?
The board.
Yes. You've seen this before, have you? Right. And they don't look at you at all, and they don't really do a thing. And every time they do look at you, it's directly in the eye. And there's always somebody behind your shoulder you feel going. So this is quite different. The American looks everywhere, and that's terribly embarrassing. Quite different. You know, the American says, "How are you staying?" "Yeah." and lifts your foot with his foot. they're very sweet, though. I think they're very friendly. You feel very...
Yeah.
Spanish? What sort of experience?
Spanish. French and Spanish? Well, in Spanish, I was in Spain last week, and I'm always a little tentative about it. They have these terrifying hats anyway, these Guardia Civil things. And I stopped at the frontier, leaving Spain, and was stopped by a terrifying-looking man. I thought they were in for trouble. And he said, there haven't been many cars around today. I said, what? He said, we got 2 men actually guarding the frontier further up, and we got no way of getting their lunch to them. So I said, well, what? He said, could you take the lunch if I call? They'll... I said, yes. I opened the door, and in came a basket with sausage and a dead chicken, and I drove up, and there were 2 men with rifles. Terrifying. I stopped. Where's our lunch? Well, they even didn't stamp the passport. It was the easiest passage I've ever had.
The Iron Curtain, that must surely be one of the worst places for controls and police and so on.
I find one is always surprised. One thinks that things are going to be difficult, and one is pleasantly surprised, or the other way around. I went to West Berlin just after I'd seen, to East Berlin just after I'd seen Carol Reed's film about it, in which there were dogs trembling at the leash, being restrained by frontier guards, and I was terrified to go. And I went in a taxi, and we stopped at the Brandenburger Tor by a West German policeman with all the new acorns and gold teeth, and... Where are you going? I said, to the East Zone. How long? Oh, about 4 hours. Why? I'm going to the theater. Which theater? I said, the Deutsche Theater. Uh-huh. What is playing there tonight? I said, Othello. Okay. Went through, got to the Russian zone. There was 1 Russian private and an East German policeman. The car didn't slow down. Spent more than 4 hours in the Eastern Zone, went to the theater, had dinner there, and God knows what. And by 2 o'clock in the morning came back. The guards had changed on the eastern side. The taxi didn't even slow down. They waved them through, got through the west. There was a new man on duty. Where are you going? I said, in the East Zone. How long for? About 6 hours. Uh-huh, right. I went to the theater. Which theater? Deutsches Theater. What was playing there tonight? Othello. So one never knows.
You haven't actually been to Russia, have you?
No.
You've got a Russian name, though, and you speak Russian.
I went to Prague, in parenthesis, once with a British delegation. And I was amazed to find that mine was the only name they could pronounce, which was a great relief for me. After many years of English.
How should they pronounce it?
Well, anyway, they took the board with people like Smith and Jones in the delegation, too, and they said, Ustinov? And I waited in the bus for a quarter of an hour until all the Smiths and Jones...
You've met Russians over here. How do they react to you when they meet you here? Do they claim you as one of their own?
No, they
Peter
wouldn't.
Ustinov himself.
No, they didn't do that, but at the same time, I have a feeling, and that goes for white Russians as well, that they're slightly amazed and intrigued why I didn't change my name, because after all, I'm not a violinist. So you can get away easily with a name like mine, you know. Or a ballet dancer. No, far from that, as you pointed out in your elegant preamble. But they very often say, Ustinov, you didn't change name. I said, no, I didn't. Why, do you think I should? No! But I remember once when my play Romeo and Juliet was on, I was called on the phone by a very nice gentleman who said, my name is Romanov, First Secretary Embassy of SSR. I saw your play. So I said, well, I hope you enjoyed it. He said, yeah, but I hear you play tennis. I said, yes, I love playing tennis. He said, then I will ask you to have my revenge on the tennis court for what you have done to Soviet diplomacy. Very nice, very agreeable. And I took a friend of mine along called Richard Reeder Harris, who was a Conservative Member of Parliament, and it was pelting with rain. But absolutely hopeless London rain, top to bottom, no wind, grey. It looked like playing tennis in a French Impressionist picture. You could hardly see the ball until it was your side of the net. It was just a Japanese print. And we started knocking up in this. It was ruinous. The racket was beginning to curve. Everything was wrong. Just knocking up. Eventually, Reeder Harris, who came up to me on my side of the net and said, "We can't play in this." And all our hair was like this. And I said, "What?" He said, "We can't play in this." I said, "But that's what they're waiting to hear." "You're right. Come on." So eventually I thought, after 10 minutes of this nightmare, I said, the only thing to do is to show some bravura. So I said to Mr. Romanov, the other side of the net, who was playing with Second Secretary Petrashevich, "Shouldn't we start scoring?" He said, "No, we can't, because have not yet arrived the umpire." So then we went on knocking up. After another 10 minutes, a very fair young man with a turned-up nose, also very pleasant, Mr. Puzhanov, came from the inside of the building and said, "I am Second Secretary Puzhanov. I am the umpire. I'm very sorry I'm late. I've been detained by ambassador." "Who will serve?" So we spun the racket. By now, yes, it was impossible to see which was rough and which was smooth, because both sides by now were rough. Torn, frayed racket. We won the toss, so I started to serve. And I made so nervous by Mr. Puzhanov, who was standing near the net, that I served a double fault. And Mr. Puzhanov, with a voice twice as loud as any used at the Centre Court in Wimbledon, shouted across the whole of Kensington, 115! We got to deuce, and there my confidence was restored, because I was now getting annoyed with this presence, and I managed by some fluke to serve an ace, which Mr. Petrashevich couldn't return. And to my amazement, the umpire called, "Advantage, Great Britain!" Well, we went on playing appalling tennis, lob after lob. It was like the first women's match in 1896. Our game had just been invented. And we managed to win. Very bad match. Hair all over the place, rain streaming down. And Mr. Romanov said to me, "Today you won, but in 2 years' time..."
Do you get into any other sport apart from tennis? Golf, for instance?
No, I don't know how to play golf at all. I had a very strange story, which you must have heard by now, about golf. It's a very sick story, which I heard the other day, which I found quite pleasant, about the man who, elderly gentleman, who did a very, very strong drive on the golf course, and amazed him, the strength of it, not the direction, because it was in the wrong direction, but it went miles, and in fact went between two houses and off the golf course. And he was rather flattered that he managed to do it. Took out another ball, went on playing, and he finished the holes he had to do, and then went back to the clubhouse and was changing when he saw the instructor, the golf professional, talking to various people in the background. Eventually the professional came up to him and said, "Excuse me, sir, was it you by any chance that drove that ball between them two houses right out on the arterial road there?" He said, "Yes, I know it was entirely the wrong direction, but I was flattered all the same that I managed to push the ball as far as that. I thought it was a good shot." He said, "Yes, it was. The only trouble, it's had repercussions, of course, which went out on the arterial road, and it happened to hit a passing motorcyclist in the face. He swerved, lost control of his mount, and went into a lorry, which tried to avoid him. Went into a Green Line coach, and that turned over, and the latest score, I think there are 19 dead, and between 24 and 25 injured, more or less seriously. I haven't heard the latest figure." "It's impossible." "Oh, I'm afraid not, sir." "Well, what should I do?" "Well, you want to hold the seat really risky." Anyway, yes. glance for, may we ask you something about Australia? You spent several months in Australia, of course, on the film The Sun Learners. What did you make of Australia and the Australians? Well, of course, it's a great relief and a source of invigoration, I think, to be in a country in which so much is still left to be done, which is so at the beginning of things. I saw a great many English families there who were dying to come back, and I must say I had rather little sympathy for them, because they tended to take you aside and say, we're from the old country, we don't like it, no, we don't like it. I found it extremely exciting, but of course it's like a kind of mixture of not America so much, I think, as Canada, and pre-Victorian England. It has a ruggedness, a Hogarthian full-bloodedness, and is now, of course, being mingled with a whole lot of immigrants.
Almost an American situation, really.
Well, it's really Wyoming territory in 1890.
What of the other, apart from the British immigrants, what about the Germans, say, and the other Europeans that are settling in there, allegedly transforming the country, or aren't they?
Well, you get, they are. And that's what I mean by it being exciting to be in a country where so much is still being done. I met a German policeman in South Australia, already with the hat with the thing on one side, and with a strong German accent, already using Australian terms, saying, in the middle of what he was having to say, saying, don't lean on that fence cover, please. No, we're having here proper dinkum weather. I didn't trust him very much, because I didn't really feel like trusting a German who left Germany to become a policeman elsewhere.
It makes a double.
Well, anyway, he was quite nice, and he then started telling a hard luck story about what the Russians had done in Berlin. And said, yes, it was really terrible when we were in Berlin. I remember, I'm not exaggerating, but I was saying that my mother was raped personally. I didn't go any further.
The Australians, of course, they always claim that the authentic Australians to be found in the outback. Well, you were filming there. What did you think?
Yes, I found some marvelous ones. But of course, in a very small town, like the one we were shooting in, you go to a hotel which has hitching posts, which are still used for horses. And it's very strange to be in a town in which the struggle for ascendancy between Chevrolet and Ford, or between the British Motor Corporation and anybody else, is completely unknown, because the most popular car is the Erskine, which went out of business in 1929. There are 6 of those, and not many of anything else. And that's the place where our cameraman tried to get a room for the night. I don't know whether I've told you this before.
Not to me.
No. So, and they said, I'm sorry, we've only got a double room. He said, well, that's all right, my wife isn't with me, I don't mind paying a bit extra. And so I said, all right, here, number 9, took the thing and gave it to him, and he went to bed in a vast room with 2 iron bedsteads, a washstand on eagle's legs, on baubles, with a ceramic bowl with water in it, nowhere to pour it out except into another bowl, a mosquito net which was crumbling, and a large hole to which the mosquitoes congregated, sort of Straits of Gibraltar, big traffic of mosquitoes. And he went to sleep, and was wakened about 2 o'clock in the morning when he saw a man with no clothes on, just about to put pajamas on. And he cleared his throat. The man turned around and said, hey. And he said, I think there's some mistake. This is my room. He said, no, that's your bed, it's my bed. This is our room. That's what a double bed means. A double room rather means in those parts. Yeah. But I met one extraordinary character. You know, when I've met people like remarkable people like Ernest Bevin, for instance, who started from very little and became Foreign Secretary. I met one of the very few people I've ever come across, the only one, in fact, who was still nothing, but one wondered whether he wouldn't very soon be Foreign Secretary. This was an extraordinary character called Jack Burriston, and it's a name that I haven't even found in any phone book in England. He was about 27 years of age, already had no teeth, fourth one, but they didn't fit proper. And he already had that clown look, everything gathered like that, with a crew cut which followed the line of his hair, including the sideburns down to here. So very long hair, but all crew cut, which gave him a really Martian look. At the same time, a walk, an extraordinary walk, with the torso pushed forward, trousers which were always about to come off, because he was usually stripped to the waist. And therefore he walked in a way that people do when they're trying to keep trousers up without any belt. being an expert in horses, that was amplified by the bow legs, okay? And a big hat with all his messages and things stuck on the inside of the hat. He had to search among his portfolio and money and things, all in the hat. And this character he works in the docks during the winter, and in the summer looks after the horses on the Sydney racetrack. Absolutely marvellous man, who one day said to me, Pete, and he writes with the greatest difficulty, word after word, and the tongue, and one day he said to me, Peter, what are you doing? Have you come across the works of, were more, what I might say, works of Henry Lawson? I said, Henry, no. Oh, you want to read them if you're in Australia? I reckon, marvellous writer. Your line about, Australian. I didn't think any more about it, and suddenly about 3 days later he came galloping on his horse with a package, which he gave to me and galloped away. He didn't want to be thanked or anything, and I opened them. 2 enormous volumes of the poetry of Henry Lawson. One the poetry and the other the prose works of Henry Lawson. And in the front of one was written, to P. Ustinov, from his old pal, his mate, J. Burriston. And in the frontispiece of the other was written, from J. Burriston, his mate, to his old pal, P. Ustinov. And I was tremendously touched by this, and I read the poetry, which I didn't really care for as much as all that, because it was very attached to its period, very Kipling-esque ballads. But the prose work I thought was absolutely marvellous and very remarkable indeed, written about 1905, 1907. Really extraordinarily good, and a great shame it wasn't done anywhere else. So then I saw him a day or two later. He said, you're in charge of reading them. I said, yeah, I didn't like the poetry very much. But the prose I thought was extraordinary. I thought it reminded me a great deal of Maxim Gorky. And I thought, oh dear, I've gone too far, now I have to explain what that means. He said, I agree. I said, you know Maxim Gorky? He said, well, I reckon my university should be the standard reading in every Australian school. And this man had read all Maxim Gorky's works, all Emile Zola, and he was like a really pure socialist of before the 1914 war. That 1914 war, no right to break out, we can still avoid it. And it was tremendously touching. This man had read volume after volume after volume, and is the only man I've ever met, really, whose opinions, which were extremely elaborate, were only formed by what he had seen and felt. And read up to a point, except that he filtered what he'd read because he had preferences, with no basis except his instinct for having these preferences, and a great affection for the Aboriginal. Because one day I saw him drinking out of a filthy, stagnant pond. I said, Jack, what are you doing? He said, I'm drinking this filthy water because I don't know no better. I've been brought up to drink it. If you drank it, I reckon you'd die. But I don't know no better, that's why I'm drinking it. You'd never get the elbow to drink that. No, he knows better. He got away, so he captured a frog. Don't do the frog no harm, but the frog's got a little filter in his throat. And he squeezes the frog, and a jet of clear water come out. He put the frog back. Don't harm him. But I've got no time, no patience to find a frog. That's why I'm doing this filthy water down here. I don't know no better. I thought he was a great character, one of the really great characters I've ever met.
You were mentioning Bevan just now. Is this someone you admire, Ernest Bevan?
Oh, yes, inevitably, enormously. Enormously.
Now, as a complete contrast, I said much earlier that you spent some time in Japan, among the Japanese. Did Japan please you?
Japan pleased me enormously because they have a sense of design which is absolutely unique among ordinary people. I'm talking about not interior decorators, but the way the ordinary people live. That when a farmer comes in from the field with his scythe, he doesn't dump it in an outhouse, he cleans it and it's put on the wall where it forms a link between the single flower, which is on the other side, and, I don't know, some a bead or something. So there's really absolutely essential sense, tremendous sense of design. At the same time, of course, it's a very amusing country too, and I couldn't quite believe it because for once, in my experience, the aeroplane took me there was early. It was 1 hour and a half early, so instead of arriving at 7:15 in the morning, it arrived at 5:45. And I really felt lost in a civilization which I'd only read about, not speaking a word of it, coming out into the airport. again, with a tremendous feeling of, you also find in England to some extent, but there more so because it's even more crowded. So you get 80 men in the airport in a tiny room, none of them touching each other, they're all avoiding each other. Nobody just worries. You're going to Canberra, Sydney airport, right? You've got an enormous airport, you're alone in the thing, and the one man there knocks into you by mistake, says, "Oh, I'm sorry," and you realize it's a very big country with a lot of room, that's why they keep hitting each other. In Japan, they're most tremendously circumspect, and I thought, I'm lost in this. I saw nothing but these people looking at, many with top hats on because they were greeting a delegation, you know. They had this mania for top hats.
5 in the morning.
At 5 in the morning, it was leaning on top of the ears because it was hot. And I thought, the man who's supposed to meet me here from the film company will never find me, and I have to wait here an hour and a half not knowing anything, not having any money. And suddenly, out of the crowd came the gentleman in question. We have been waiting for you. And I said, but we're an hour and a half early. We came at 5:30 in case the plane was early. Have you ever heard of such a thing anywhere else? Anyway. So then they talk about the inscrutable Orient, but in point of fact, they're absolutely transparent faces, because he suggested in the subtlest possible way with my relatively Western face, I can't emulate or pretend to. He suggested, what was this man interested in? Is it girl shows or ancient monuments? I don't know how he conveyed this, but it was quite clear. Something like that. I got the message anyway, because he dealt with many visiting people. So then he said, first of all, you will take a Japanese massage. I said, are you sure I'd enjoy that? Very difficult to know what that means. Anyway, I went with him to a bathhouse, which is in a fairly sleazy quarter of Tokyo, with what the butler saw arcade underneath, where the butler was seeing all sorts of things. I see that even, it was inscrutable, nothing. They were enjoying themselves, butlers. So we went upstairs to the bathhouse, and I was given a tag with a number on it, and I knocked at the door, and the door opened, and there was a lady with about 3 rows of independently working teeth, and a sad expression, wearing a very flimsy kind of gym tunic, diaphanous gym tunic, who then started to take my clothes off without my being able to say a thing. Went for my tie until I had absolutely nothing on, and then put me sitting down in a box and closed the lid. I was like in the stocks. The lid down to here, and then steam started to pump through until I was boiling. With nothing to defend myself with now, just a head coming out. She then started toying with my beard, at the same time singing an ancient Japanese lullaby, which is the most agonizing experience I've ever been through, because it isn't musically very attractive to our ears. And I couldn't bear it, and she said, Anyway, when I came out of that, it was so strange I wasn't even embarrassed, because it had no connection with anything I'd ever known before. She then asked me to sit down, not on a stool, but on a sandal, no bigger than this, a little pagoda thing. She said, sit down. Well, I'm big enough to find it awfully difficult to aim at a thing that size. And there comes a point when I'm halfway down, when somebody of any weight has to make a decision to let themselves go. You can't go on controlling your fall. And twice I missed this thing, hit the side of it, and it flew up, and she caught it, put it back again without saying anything. No aspersion at all. The third time I thought I'd got onto it. And I got up to see, and it wasn't there anymore, but by now I was so hot it was stuck to me. So then eventually I managed to sit down again, and then she started soaping me with a huge brush, and again singing. And I wasn't embarrassed, I just sat there thinking, oh, this is very strange. Until she was working on my back, out of sight, when she suddenly became clear that she'd had a lot of truck with American and British and Japanese and Australian businessmen, because she suddenly, from nowhere, came a voice which said, we are having rather better weather in Tokyo this week. And then I wanted all my clothes back. The lifetime, the kind of English small talk you get in the newsagent. So.
Peter, let's come back home. Now, there's one thing that's particularly striking about all your plays, and that is your knowledge of and your interest in military matters. Now, why are you so fascinated by generals?
Oh, that's an awfully difficult question. It's the kind of job which I myself would loathe to have to take the kind of decisions they do, and I can never quite understand how somebody can bring themselves to say things, or even to think things. I know it's essential, perhaps, once you're going to have wars, but to say things like, if it's going to cost more than 20,000 casualties, I don't think it's worth it. This is something which is to me absolutely chilling.
You weren't a general. You were in the army, but not a general.
No, I was a private, as I once said, third-class smoking, which you see, for 4.5 years, and therefore I had a very good opportunity to study generals. In fact, I was let in on a conference once when we were making a film called The True Glory about the war in the West. A conference between generals and admirals who weren't urgently needed at the time. You can imagine the kind of generals and admirals those were.
Yes. What year was this?
This was right near the end of the war. And it was under the chairmanship of a civilian who rose, and I was put in a corner because I was a private, but I was allowed to stay there because I had to write some parts of the script. And this film was going to be released out of newsreel material. And the chairman got up and said, "Now, gentlemen, we don't want in any way," he was an Englishman, "we don't want in any way to betray the kind of salty language which we all know is spoken in the forces. At the same time, I've been asked to point out to you that it is a film for public release. We've reached a compromise, which I think is a happy one, to limit the amount of swear words to 5. Now, the way that these are to be allocated are 2 for the British forces. These 2 of course, in British forces. When I say British forces, they include, of course, Dominion forces and colonial troops, anybody who is fighting under British orders. 2 for the United States. Yeah. And 1, mon général, pour la France. A French general who, de Gaulle had, a very distinguished but elderly French general, who got absolutely furious and said, "You're taking advantage of the fact that France is for the moment occupied. You will regret the decision to limit what..." He wanted parity with the other powers. You see, this is a situation which has existed ever since about other matters. The civil servant, showing these resources which had given him his high job, said, Mike, yes, please. I'm sure that I'm sure if the facts are presented in the light that you've shown, quite rightly, I think, to the foreign chief, I'm sure that we can amend those to 6 swear words. In that case, I think they should be allocated 2 to the British forces, as I said before, include, of course, Dominion and troops, 2 to the forces of the United States, and 2 for General. I listened to this with absolute amazement, what my betters were doing. And suddenly an English admiral got up with the aid of a stick, with a purple face and white hair. He hadn't lost any hair since his birth, that type of thing. And he got up and he said, "I just want to put it on record." I think it's obvious.
On that preoccupation with the military mind, it is something which you do enjoy researching into very much, isn't it?
Yes, I must say I do. Because it seems to me a hangover from a different period, which is still struggling to survive in this day and age.
And
and managing to survive under many circumstances, yes. I found a couple of books a long time ago remaindered on Uxbridge Underground Station, which then had some old books. One of them called Jottings from an Active Life.
who wrote this, Peter?
Yes, Colonel Sir Weston Jarvis, I think his name was. And he said in it was a very admirable book of its period and time, but it ended by saying, "All my life I have been fired by 2 men and what they said to me. Those 2 are Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner. Cecil Rhodes once said to me, 'Listen, Weston Jarvis, you are an Englishman, and therefore have won first prize in the lottery of life.' And Lord Milner said to me, 'Everyone can help.' I've never found out what that means or what that meant. But he ended the book on that heroic note, and then as a footnote said, bearing these two things in mind, there is very little doubt in my mind that democracy can still be educated along the right lines. It was a splendid book. And the other book was called Rifleman and Hussar, published about 1933, privately. Obviously, there's a big coat of arms on the front. And it's much more fascinating reading because it's a day-by-day account of a life of that kind, which fascinated me. Starting out when he said, among people who were in Harrow with me were Lawson, afterwards Lawson Smith. I didn't know how that happened. Smith Dorian, who did so well at the Cato, and who saved up every penny he could to send his boys to his old school, Harrow, retiring to a cottage in Dinar and giving up golf. More than we said from some of my contemporaries. I sat next to him one day at a cricket match, and turning to him, I tapped him on the knee. Wonderful to record this actual gesture. I tapped him on the knee and said, look here, it must be time your eldest was leaving Harrow by now, isn't it? He said, alas, my wife made me send him to Eton. I've had to pay up twice already, and I'm practically ruined by his extravagance. And I'm now shipping him off abroad. I very nearly said, serves you well right. But I didn't wish to hurt the fellow's feelings. And this man writes the most extraordinary things. For instance, he said during the campaign against the Mahdi in Egypt, he said, we entrained at Alexandria at 11 o'clock, arrived Ramleh just after 12, brisk action commenced at 1. Spider Rutledge Hooker, and Jimmy Gray joined action back from leave in a cab at 2:30. You can imagine that, these two officers just from England trying to pay the cab. And you got change for 6 piastres. Look out! Marvelous. Anyway. And then, of course, there was the later one, which I liked very much, during the 1914 war, when he was too old to really partake. This was really a very sad entry. And he was made a postal censor in France. And he said, German airplane passed over our lines this morning, dropped a hand grenade, shape of a woman's hand mirror, filled with iron filings. A funny kind of way to conduct a war. And then went on later in the afternoon, he said, brought the German airplane down. The occupants, i.e. pilot and observer, hand upped. We found nothing on them except some rather doubtful photographs. It just shows what pigs the Germans are, flying over our lines, in an aeroplane, in wartime, with pictures like that on them. That's right.
What kind of unit were you in the army?
I was in an infantry unit at the beginning, where we had a very, well, everybody has experiences of that kind, of course. We had a very typical sergeant major who was punch drunk. He kept avoiding imaginary blows. He'd been a lightweight champion of something. And we were put in a very crowded billet at the beginning, about 12 of us in a very small room. And after a week, we were given a better place to sleep. And I met him in the street, and he said, how are you? No. It was the nearest he could get to my name. Unlike the Czechoslovakian Closton. No. How are you? No. I said, very well, thank you, sir. Stand up then. How's the new billet, eh? I said, oh, it's much better, thank you, sir. It's much less congested. He said, oh, no. More room, too, innit? No.
Well, while you were still a private, you were making films during the war, weren't you? Now, does this mean you had a relatively easy time of it?
No, it got more and more confused as time went on, of course, because I was supposed to help on a technical side. And eventually we did a film called The Way Ahead, which I helped to write and acted in. And I was made a civilian for a while. Then after I finished that, I went back into the army at Wembley Park, where I was supposed to write film scripts still, but at the same time sleep in a depot for 3 nights of the week, and the other 3 nights I was given a sleeping out pass, but still had to report at Wembley at 7 o'clock in the morning with a knife and fork to be marched to Lyons, where we had breakfast and then dismissed, and then I crossed the whole of London again and started working on my film script. This became extremely trying. And after a time, I came out in hives, and I don't know what happened. I was sent to a military hospital. And just that time, I had a play which went on. And they examined me at the military hospital. I had to eat barium meals and be x-rayed and all the rest of it. And eventually went in to see a man called a personnel selection officer who had snow-white hair and a black moustache, which already was rather startling. And he was a Scotsman, a very thoughtful man like that. And he said, "We've decided that you're psychologically unfit for film writing." He was doing very well in the West End then. "And we're therefore inclined to send you to Donington Park as a clerk storeman." So I said, then he said, "How much money do you earn a week?" And I had the play, which was running in Edinburgh in that moment. And I said, "I can't tell you because I belong to a kind of profession that I never know how much I earn a week." He said, "You're hedging." I said, "No, I just don't know. I'm not employed. I work for myself." He thought he'd make it easy for me, and he said, "How much money would you, for instance, earn this week if things were normal?" I said, "Well, this week I've earned £200. "You're lying!" Terrified. And then he gave me, I should the receipts from the theatre. I was just lucky that week. He gave me one of those games to play with square pegs and round holes, which I then, for the only time in my life, really lost my temper, and picked it up and threw it out of the window. And I was seized by 5 men and taken to the head psychiatrist. And while I was there, my play, just after this, came down to London, and which was the Banbury Nose, it was called. And the impresario of the play, the producer of it, called me up at the military hospital and said, "Can't you come down for the first night? And anyway, we'd like you there for the dress rehearsal, because I'd never seen it, in order to see whether anything needs to be done." I said, "You'd better ring the colonel of this establishment." He called the colonel and said, could you, we've got a patient there who's got a play coming on. Would it be possible at all for him to see it? It's going to be a little bit, in London, is it? Yes. When? On Thursday. Yes, I'll look into it. Of course, my wife and I are both very keen theatre girls. We don't get much opportunity to see the theatre. Very heavy hints were dropped, so the tickets were sent to the colonel. And I had to put on my uniform again because the hospital blue looked too grim. And anyway, it was only because of a stomach complaint. Despite people kept offering me cigarettes in trains that I had to refuse. And so I went to the first night, and it went rather well. It was a habit of the Times to drag you onto the stage afterwards. And I made a little speech, and then went back to the military hospital the next day, and found myself on a charge for having taken the curtain call in suede shoes. That's the penalty of asking colonels, do you
Peter, can we end on quite a different note? What do you feel passionately about? What do you feel strongly enough about to take part in some political action? Do you feel like sitting on the pavement outside the Ministry of Defence? What would make you take part in that kind of action?
I wouldn't sit on the pavement outside the Ministry of Defence if there was any other way of doing it. I feel passionate about all sorts of things, yes. I feel passionate about the death sentence, first of all, because I think it's highly immoral to take away something that you can't give, and I don't believe that we're really qualified for that kind of revenge. At the same time, I had a long series of telegrams to Governor Brown about the Chessman thing, for instance, in which I had a point which I don't think is the usual one about a case like that, in fact about any case, is that I think the death sentence is a misnomer. I don't think it exists because we can't condemn anybody to something over which we have no control, and nobody knows what death is. What we are in fact doing is to condemn them to spend the last hours or days of their life as unpleasantly as possible, which is the only thing we have any control over. If this were not so, then why would the right of suicide be denied these people because that's the death sentence as much as anything else. Why do you take away their bootlaces and their ties? Consequently, the real sentence is to last 3 weeks. It's a 3-week sentence, which is put an end to. Consequently, a 6-week sentence is different to a 3-week sentence, because it's exactly double. When you get 12 years, it's completely repellent. I think it's out of all proportion with any crime that's ever been committed. As in Chessman's case. I feel very passionate about that, and I have great respect for the French, because I think that at one point President Auriol commuted a death sentence because there was a 4-day delay.
Peter, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.